everyone. Welcome to CIO Dimension's Innovation Talk series. I'm Radhika Nalayam, Managing Editor for CIO Dimension. In this episode, I will be in conversation with Maheswaran Sundaram, Country Manager for Varonis India. Varonis is a data security and analytics company headquartered in the US. Mahesh is an information security industry veteran with over 2 decades of experience across a range of security technologies and processes. He is a technologist at heart and has a wealth of experience supporting the deployment of key data protection projects in several leading enterprises across the APAC region. Previously, he has worked with organizations such as Health Systems, which is now Fortra, and also companies like Titus and ForcePoint. Today, we will be discussing the changing cybersecurity landscape and some of the key areas that CISOs are prioritizing. Welcome, Mahesh. Thank you so much for joining me today on the show.
Good morning, Radhika, and thank you so much for this opportunity. Pleasure to be here as always.
Great. So let's just dive into the conversation. Basically, I want to start off by something that's very basic. We all know that cybersecurity leaders have a lot on their plate today. Employees, as we know, will continue to work from anywhere, making remote and hybrid working the default choice for organizations. Digital transformation will further accelerate across all kinds of organizations and industries. The data is everywhere, across devices, networks, and clouds. And all of this is significantly increasing the attack surface of organizations, as we know. And I'm sure you've been working closely with several cybersecurity leaders in India, helping them get their cybersecurity strategy in place. So I want to understand basically what are the top 3 or 4 priorities for CISOs and practitioners in India, considering the changing landscape?
I think that's a great question, Radhika, and you summed it up really well. I think the attack surface is completely different than what it was 2 years back, and it's constantly evolving. So I think as cybersecurity practitioners, it's important for organizations to assess what exactly is their cybersecurity posture and is it relevant for the attack surface that is currently existing. So a few things that which we think are important for these practitioners to consider when they actually evaluate their cybersecurity posture is how relevant are the controls that they've deployed in protecting against these evolving threats. I think that's important. Most organizations have deployed a lot of asset-centric, perimeter-centric controls, which is important. I'm not saying it's not. But at the same time, now, since like the way you said, since it's data moving out beyond assets and boundaries, it's also equally important for organizations to see whether they have adequate controls around data. So one of the things that we normally say is most organizations, when we look at assessing their security posture, they have a lot of controls around threats to defend and detect threats, which is important. We're not saying it's not. But threats is something that a hacker control, right? Because they can always come up with a new exploit. They can always come up with a new malware variant, and they can find ways to get into an organization if they are really keen to penetrate that particular organization. So they have to assume that they're going to be breached at some point in time. So that's one important thing. So while they are looking at making investments, we think there is a unique opportunity now for security practitioners to also have enough controls around elements that they can control if they want to, which are data and users. So if they understand what is important for them, what data is important for them, what are the key users and what are the key user behaviors, and they have enough controls around these 2 new perimeters, I would say, which is data and users, they then would be able to establish a lot of predictive capabilities in detecting threats. And whenever they see anything suspicious happening either with data or around users, they can predict that something is going to go wrong and control it before it creates a significant impact. So that's one part. So assess your cybersecurity posture and not just spend too many controls around threats, which is not controlled by them, it's controlled by hackers, but also have enough controls around data and users. And if they do that, they can have these elements in better control and defend and predict a lot of threats which are complex. That's one part. Second thing is, I think like the way I said, users are working on riskier boundaries now. They used to predominantly operate from corporate provided assets, corporate perimeters, which are much more secure. So awareness is going to be very, very key, for these practitioners to ensure the employees are more aware. When I say awareness, these are happening for a longer period of time now, but are these awareness programs that organizations have in place proactive. When I say proactive, most of these programs are like either trainings, they have wallpapers and stuff like that, which is good. I'm not saying it's not, but there is a very thin line between professional and personal life now, and mood swings can happen within a matter of few hours for people because they're just working in a completely non-professional workspace sometimes, right? So it's important for organizations to educate users as and when they're about to make mistakes. Like say, for instance, I'm trying to click a link, which is probably malicious in my email. Rather than saying it's blocked, if they make me aware that what is the risk that I could have introduced myself and for the organization by clicking that link, then in a way that my awareness becomes more real time, more proactive, and it helps me to also probably wear a security hat at least for a few hours in a day. And suddenly organizations have a larger workforce to defend against these organized crimes, Radhika. So I would just say these are the two key things in the interest of, I know it's a long response. So these are the two things that we normally would recommend for cybersecurity practitioners. Awareness campaigns need to make the user know why it's happening. Like I always believe there are good brakes in high-speeding cars for the drivers to get more confidence to drive fast, right? So the security controls are perceived such way by users, they are going to be participating more on an organization security strategy.
Okay, great. The other aspect I want to bring in now here, Mahesh, and it's also very relevant because various reports show that cybersecurity spending will continue to grow. And we know that it has been on an upward curve for quite some time now. It's a strategic priority for every organization. And they have been investing steadily on multiple security tools and platforms to address evolving threats. So at this stage, I think maximizing cybersecurity ROI has become a key priority for every CISO. So I want to kind of understand how exactly are the practitioners approaching ROI, especially when it is very difficult to measure, the intangibles and all of that. So how exactly are they effectively measuring it? And also, of course, your experience on what are some of the steps to ensure better ROI of cybersecurity investments?
Again, I think that's a great question. And like the way you said, it's a very, very complex challenge for cybersecurity practitioners, especially to measure an ROI on a security investment, right? But I think there are a few things as consultants, we normally say, and most CISOs also, most effective CISOs who try to get good budgets for the security spend, what they do is, first, they understand what's going to be the cost of the breach, right? Specific to their vertical, specific to the industry geography, how many breaches have happened, and what's an average cost of the breach is something that the security practitioners need to be aware of. It could be because of compliance, it could be because of a data breach, compliance violation or a data breach. So organizations have to know what potentially could be a cost of breach. And once they know that, then they would also be able to estimate what is the cost that they've saved for the organization by avoiding that breach, because they've not reported the breach for the last 1 year, for instance, right? So say, for instance, finance vertical in a specific geography has seen about 100 breaches. I'm just giving an example last year. But this particular organization, which is under finance vertical, has never been compromised. And they know what is going to be the cost for an average data breach. And they also know that that has not happened for the organization, at least it's not reported. And that's how they have saved this organization from that particular cost. So how exactly is the spend that they've done is preventing them from breaches is something that security practitioners should predict, should estimate and report. And if they do that, I think the stakeholders are going to be funding for security strategies and security tools. It gets a lot more confident on the strategy that the organization is following to prevent against breaches. So that's very, very important. What's going to be the cost of breach and how much of that breach cost is avoided because of the investments that the security practitioners have done for that organization. Secondly, when it comes to incident management and remediation, two major metrics that we normally say is like what is the average time to detect a threat? So we call it as mean time to detect. And what is the mean time to respond to a threat, right? So this is something that needs to be measured by the SOC specialist or the SOC strategies. So if they see improvement because of acquiring controls, if they're able to detect a threat much faster, if they're able to respond to a threat much faster, then by just measuring these times and reporting it, again, it becomes easy to measure return on investment and how effective an organization has become through investments that they've made to better detect and respond to incidents. And the last thing, like I mentioned, if it's going to be around data security posture management, what we also recommend for organizations to understand how much of data they know is important for their organization, say a year back and now. How much of the data is exposed or overexposed? How much of the data is stale? I mean, we call it as redundant, obsolete, toxic data. How much of the data is stale or rot? So if they provide this visibility, and because of the controls that they've deployed, if they're able to better measure that they have now have 60% coverage of detecting important data last year, it's increased to 75%. If they've reduced overexposure of data, like say for instance, from 80% to 40%, that again shows the value of the technology. So most organizations, when they acquire tools or when they try to implement a strategy through tools or processes, it's important to know what is the reason why they're acquiring and what is the cost of breach that they're trying to address through that particular investment, and how exactly is that investment helping them to improve outcomes that they actually anticipated, metrics that they actually anticipated, and also cost. If they find a way to put this in their governance and risk dashboard and present it to stakeholders, then I think they'll be in a much better state to show their effectiveness and also get investments, considering the way the threat landscape is evolving. It's very, very important for organizations to stay current and keep enhancing their security controls, Radhika. I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I think from what it used to be a few years ago, the mindset towards security and security investments would have definitely changed. And you must have seen that difference happening across boards and business teams and leadership teams, right? They know that their
Absolutely.
brand is at stake, the brand values at stake the moment there is a cyber incident. They lose use by just having one such incident. So all of this has played a bigger role in the last few years from, what cybersecurity as a function has evolved, right?
Absolutely. And that's where I think, to be fair to the stakeholders who are spending, I mean, security practitioners have been always asking for more money, stating that the threats are evolving and things like that, which is true. But at the same time, how relevant are the investments that they've made, like say maybe 5 or 6 years back, around defending threats? Is it relevant or not? Is also something that the practitioners needs to constantly measure, like the way I said, and keep changing those controls, and also make investments on tools which are future-proof. It's not just addressing a specific challenge that exists at that point in time, so they don't react to a specific incident, but also think that the investment is going to be future-proof for the next 3 to 5 years is something that they have to think and make investments.
Right. Mahesh, the other aspect which is kind of picking up a lot of momentum is the automation in the cyber security arena. Automation tools are poised to revolutionize cybersecurity, right from threat detection to incident response to everything in between, right? I want to kind of understand what are the emerging trends in this area. What can we look out for in the coming days, especially because automation has, as a technology itself, has really advanced. We are talking about generative AI and all of those tools. So what is one thing that we can look out for in the automation of cybersecurity side?
Yeah, I think that's again a great question. I think it's fair to say, and most practitioners also agree to it, that capacity for organizations to create and share data has exceeded their capacity to protect it. And the way the businesses have leveraged automation to collaborate, to share, to analyze data is far better than security practitioners leveraging automation to defend against, organized and targeted threats, right? So that's the truth. And I think most practitioners would agree to it. And that's where I think automation has got, and to be fair to also the security practitioners, I mean, it's not a fair battle for them. I mean, I think all it takes for a hacker is to just have one successful attack. He might just be trying 100 times and the practitioners could be defending most of it. But all it takes is just one attack and they become bad. So they're under constant pressure, and their ability to innovate, and with a cybersecurity skill shortage that exists, it becomes very tough for them to keep pace with how the businesses are moving ahead and demanding cybersecurity practitioners to evolve and protect threats that happen because of that. So I think automation has been used by organizations, and it's only going to increase as we speak. There are a lot of ways that cybersecurity practitioners can leverage automation, considering there is a cybersecurity skill shortage, right? So, I mean, like say for instance, around solutions that we normally propose to customers, what we typically tell them is when it comes to leveraging automation is how tough it is for them to go and identify what data is important. And that's where I think automation can play a huge role because of the way technologies have evolved. And organizations can leverage these technologies to automatically go and look for information that is important and relevant for them. So they can leverage tools to go and identify what data is important for them. Secondly, we call it as blast radius. What we mean by blast radius is, if a user credential gets compromised, what is the impact that particular organization can have because of the number of files that particular account can get access to. And for a 10,000 plus user organization, we normally see this number to be around 12 plus million, which is huge. While on day one, when an employee joins a 10,000 plus user organization, that person gets access to approximately 12 plus million files. While for the day-to-day job, probably that person would need about a few thousand files. So organizations have exposed information to a lot of people, and they can leverage automation to understand what their blast radius is, how information is overexposed, and also contain it. Thereby, they reduce this risk of attack surface and blast radius around data. And lastly, one of the important thing, where organizations can also leverage automation, I said controls around data and users earlier. If they start leveraging automation to track user access and data access patterns, I'll explain this with an example. I'm sorry, the response might be slightly long, but I think it's important for me to clarify what I mean. Like say, for instance, if organizations want to know what's Mahesh's normal access, user access behavior and data access behavior, I log in from, say, typically India as a geography, from my official asset and also my mobile device. I typically access 2 or 3 data stores, maybe like say file servers, O365, Salesforce, etc. And normally about 100 documents in a day. So that's my typical data access and user access pattern. If my credential gets compromised, or if I become rogue, then I'm going to behave completely different than where I normally behave. So say, for instance, if it's a malware that stole my credentials, it's going to be logging from a geography that I've never logged in before. It's probably going to access different machines with my credentials and try to get access data. It's going to touch data types that I've never touched earlier. It's probably trying to encrypt a lot of data if it's a ransomware, right? So organizations can now look at a lot of suspicious activity if they start understanding what is a normal user access and data access behavior. And whenever they see a suspicious activity, and that's where AI/ML models can significantly help organizations. And whenever when they see a suspicious activity, they can predict that behavior, and they can contain that behavior by locking my account, for instance, before it creates a significant risk for their organization. So automation has got a huge. I mean, I just mentioned automation from a data security standpoint. Similarly, maybe in incident response and remediation, in creating awareness campaigns, in analyzing data that they collect from different data stores. I think automation has got a huge role to play to enhance cybersecurity frameworks for organizations and address the cybersecurity skill shortage. So that's one part. But at the same time, I think it's organizations, when they look at leveraging automation, like I said, they should not just think to look at deploying automation to address a specific threat. They should see whether it's going to be future-proof. They also have to evaluate culture that exists within the organization, because organizations' capability to embrace technology differs in different organizations based on the culture that exists. Something could be top-down, something would be very open to embrace technologies, because mostly cybersecurity or data security is becoming a business strategy, not just an IT or a security initiative. And since every stakeholder has to participate, the technology or the strategy around automation that organizations try to use should also factor the culture that exists in the organization and should be future-proof, considering the systems, considering the way the business landscape is going to evolve, considering the threat landscape that's going to be evolving. Because they embrace automation for short-term benefits, and if it's not going to be effective, like say 1 year from now, then it's going to be very tough for them to convince stakeholders to look at another way to embrace automation. So these are the factors that we also recommend cybersecurity practitioners to consider when they look at deploying automation. And I fully agree, automation is going to significantly help organizations to boost their cybersecurity frameworks.
So that also brings us to a very different point, Mahesh. Like you rightly mentioned, automation is great. You mentioned some really great use cases. But cybersecurity automation, it sounds like an easy win, but getting there can be quite a challenging prospect. So since you've been working with a lot of Indian organizations, I want to understand, what is the adoption level of automation within cybersecurity looking like in India? And in addition to some of the points you mentioned, what are some of the key challenges in automation adoption, especially for Indian organizations on the cybersecurity front?
Right. To get back to the first question, Radhika, I think we have started seeing organizations embracing automation at different layers already, and other a few other organizations are looking to invest on automation tools because I think they have come to a realization it's very critical to have automation in place, considering the skill shortage, attrition the industry faces, and stuff like that. So, and we have already started organizations looking at automation in a lot of their strategies, starting from awareness around people aspects, and also around processes in terms of incident management, remediation, addressing cybersecurity tickets raised, creating awareness for users around phishing emails or credential compromises, etc. And also on controls like data security, security incident management, cybersecurity orchestration and response. So we have seen organizations leveraging automation at different layers, and it's only increasing. But like the way you said, of course, it also has its own challenges, mostly because cybersecurity is very complex, right? And I mean, organizations have deployed a lot of traditional controls. Some sectors like say healthcare, uh, uh, defense, even government, they have a lot of legacy systems in place. So depending on the ecosystem that exists and the cybersecurity landscape that they are facing to deploy controls, automation probably might not be leveraged the same way by different industry verticals, depending on what sort of legacy systems that they have to operate with, what sort of investment that they've already made around cybersecurity. So the cost of embracing automation should not exceed the cost of risk that they're trying to address. So that is one thing that we recommend cybersecurity practitioners to constantly evaluate. Look at the cybersecurity ecosystem in place. I said earlier, the culture that exists within that organization, what investments that they've already made around IT assets and applications. Is it possible for them to change that to embrace automation? So these are a few things that they need to consider, before automation is leveraged in cybersecurity. Because we also have seen organizations invested heavy on leveraging automation, but they probably are using only 20 or 30% of what that technology can offer, mostly because they're not able to fit that into their ecosystem. So it's very important to evaluate that. Secondly, I also mentioned that the automation strategy that organization has and the investments that they make around it should be future-proof and not just short-term. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because uh, there is, I mean, we all agree there is a lack of skilled personnel, both in IT as well as security. So if they have to change these automation models, if they have to change the AML models to make that automation strategy relevant for that moment, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be significantly tough, and cost of making that change is probably going to be high, significantly high. So it's very important to make investments considering what exactly is going to be the strategy, how exactly attack surface is going to be evolving for them. Our businesses coming up with new initiatives that might change the cybersecurity landscape significantly for them. So these are the certain things that also needs to be considered, before making an investment around automation. And lastly, obviously with automation, there's always a debate between human engagement and automation, and how much can you trust automation. Like say, for instance, AML model says that a behavior of a user is not normal, but that probably could be a genuine behavior of that user. So how exactly are they going to manage these false positives, negatives, and so they should have a process in place to communicate things when such things happen. And they also make the users, so awareness is very critical. So when they deploy automation, the end users should also know how it's going to be impacting them, what probable false positives can happen in advance. They should do a pilot for specific people in different business functions based on the automation strategies they're embracing. Do a comprehensive user acceptance test, not just from a feature perspective, but also from an end user experience perspective. So do that, and once it passes is when I think it needs to be embraced at a large scale to ensure that they manage some of the issues around false positives that probably automation tools can bring. So these are certain things that I would recommend, and most importantly, we touched upon it. I think one of the challenges, organizations not able to demonstrate the return on investment by making an investment around automation. So it's very critical for them to know what metrics will improve because of embracing this automation technology, because the investment is going to be significant from people, process, and technology standpoint. So they should know the metrics that will improve, capture them before they deploy the tool, and the results they get after deploying the automation strategy. And then if they present it, they build a lot of trust, and probably they will get more investments around automation whenever they ask, is what I think, Radhika. So these are certain things that needs to be aware, and some challenges probably that cybersecurity practitioners would go through when they look at embracing automation.
Great. I think that's a great point, because automation has two sides, right? It brings great advantages, but it also comes with its own risks and biases and whatnot. So organizations need to be prepared when they're adopting automation on the cybersecurity side. My last question is, of course, you mentioned future proofing. So I'm quite keen to understand, what does the future of threat landscape look like today? I mean, going forward. Because we've been talking about ransomware, malware, data breaches, and whatnot. And I think every Indian organization has suffered some sort of cyber incident at some stage. So what does the future look like, and what are some of the emerging threats that you would like to talk about, please?
Yeah, so I think it's constantly evolving. But one thing that's constant, if you see around threats, is either it's targeting users or data. Like mostly, hackers try to go after these two core elements to create impact for organizations. Secondly, most of these breaches either happen because someone not doing something that they're supposed to, at someone doing something that they're not supposed to. So basic hygiene issues is still a big issue, Radhika. While we talk about, we use complex acronyms like zero-day threats, AI, ML, but most breaches, though the attack techniques could be different, it is because the basic hygienes are still missing with most organizations, which is sort of discomforting, I would say. We still have seen organizations, like I said, exposing a lot of data to people that they're not supposed to access. Admins, not using multi-factor authentication and logging onto critical assets. So it's very critical. Before I answer the question on how the attack landscape is changing, it's important to see whether we are missing, as cybersecurity practitioners, to enforce something that is in our control, which is address the basic hygiene issues. So knowing the unknown is, most focus, unfortunately, is going towards knowing the unknown. And organizations assume a lot of things, think a lot of things, and to be fair, I think the whole cybersecurity industry is operating in fear, right? So but it's important to know what is controllable and what is known to them is a problem. They already know about it. Fix that first, and then look at evolving cybersecurity to address new things that probably can happen, rather than trying to address something that they don't know about. So that's one recommendation that we give normally as consultants to cybersecurity practitioners. In terms of threats that's going to be evolving, I think I continue to see hacker communities becoming more organized, more targeted. They're going to share a lot of intel between hacker communities to make their attacks faster. Like the way they are operating. They have probably a much more efficient business and operating model. They have their numbers, they have targets, so they go through those pressures. There we see a lot of organization happening there, and it's only going to continue to evolve. So that's one thing. Secondly, I think techniques that hackers are going to use are also going to evolve. I mean, AML are also going to be leveraged significantly by the hacker communities to go and make attacks faster, to go and make attacks tough to detect and defend. So that's definitely going to happen. So I would say at a broad level, more collaboration with between the hacker communities, and they becoming more organized, and leveraging a lot of new techniques like automation, AML, to make those attacks faster and successful is something that they will continue to do, is what I think. So it becomes important for the cybersecurity practitioners also to collaborate, which I think is still a missed opportunity. A lot of threat intelligence can be shared between nation states, can be shared between different communities that exist within different industry verticals. So I think we as a community should start sharing more threat intel between ourselves to defend against the more complex and organized crime.
Right. I think the bad actors seem to have better motivations to keep this going. So it's an interesting space to watch out, of course, and great insights, Mahesh. Thank you so much for joining me today on the show.
Thanks a lot, Radhika. Thanks again for this opportunity. Pleasure.